comes to us from the wilds of Ohio. He lived among a savage race known as the Amish. Oh boy, you heard of these people?
Yeah.
They all dress in black. Even the women wear beards. I mean, it's terrible. No, they're good people, but he worked really hard for life. He was pulling plows of weight about 3 times what we weigh here. Right? Out there, you know, pulling plows, and of course those plows have no wheels. So imagine 3 carriages with no wheels. And taught here at the Citadel. About 10 years ago, I said, you know what? I like teaching, but I hate grading. I'd like to be outdoors now and then. Here we are. Get to work with horses, get to meal nights, and nice people. This is the market that opened up in 1807. This market opened a couple years before Abraham Lincoln was born. And it's open every day of the year except for Christmas and when it floods, which is routinely. It floods all the time. That's the first place to flood in this low-lying town. Creek bed. If we get a high tide, water will come up out of the drain. And you go, wait, there's nowhere for the rain to go, and then it rains. And the water goes right up this street, and people go on sandbags, and it is time to get a beer, because we are going to have to wait till tide goes down. It's all time. Now, today's Friday, right? So that means tonight, you know, these guys are packing up here, but tonight we'll have a bunch of new people come in, and we'll have night market tonight. So if you're going to be around, that'll be going until about 9 o'clock or so. Now, where are y'all from here? Where were we from up here?
Michigan, Florida.
Michigan and Florida. From Michigan or from Florida?
We were Michigan now.
There you go. Common story. But you?
We're locals, but he's from California.
Okay, we're in California.
San Diego.
San Diego.
No, he's from California.
How about the rest of you?
Nashville.
Nashville, Tennessee.
They don't want it.
Which is pretty much California now anyway. It's another colony. It's Vegas. All right. Now there's some fierce dogs. All right, Les. So here's the deal. Charleston starts out in 1670. We start out as a frontier outpost. England starts in America up in Virginia, right? 1607, Pocahontas with Jonathan Smith. 13 years later, the Pilgrims show up in Massachusetts. That's north. Quakers show up north. Roman Catholics coming to Maryland. Still North Virginia. We jump way down here in 1670. That's a bold move, and it's a scary move because the Spanish are just south here in St. Augustine. So we are the only city the British are going to build on this continent that has a wall around it. A fortress wall with a moat. The moat's right there. We're in the moat now. The wall's right here. And that's the state church inside the walled city. That's the Church of England, and that particular church is the home of the oldest congregation between Florida and Virginia, 1680. It's the Church of England, in an English colony, that's your tax dollars at work, right? But you don't have to go to it. We have religious freedom here. They know it's going to be hard to get people to move here, so they offer religious freedom. That brings Germans. They want to be Lutherans. We got more Germans than any city in America. More Scottish as well, because the Presbyterians move here. That's how devastating the fire was. And you know, just looking at the photograph of this, from right after the Civil War, and yeah, it's just like nothing until you hit this building. Now, because that doesn't burn, neither does this. This is the Irish Social Hall here. This is this is Hibernian Hall. And all the different ethnic groups, and there were a lot of them, right, had their own social halls and societies. This one just had the best parties, right? It's the Irish one.
That's the harp.
Still has a pretty
Irish
big
harp.
party every March, actually. Right across the street, you see one of our 11 stone streets. Now those stones you notice are round. And now that we know stone is not native, you might wonder why would they have brought round ones to pave a street, right? Those came as weight, right, to keep ships from tipping over. They're ballast stones. When the ships got here, they didn't need them because they were going to go for rights, right? So they just stuffed the stones out. They would have put about 6 inches of sand on top of that. Now we're coming up to an important intersection here. This is the Four Corners of Law. This is our city hall right here, which is the second oldest city hall in America. It dates to 1801. This is the county courthouse, which is actually older. It was built in the 1750s. Originally, this was the Capitol building in South Carolina. So it used to be the capital city. So the royal governor went in here. But let's stand back for a minute. I wish we had more motorcycles. Sorry. For that little weed and leaf blowers, man. All right. Across the way, federal courthouse. A lot of important civil rights cases are handed down there in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s. And then mine, which is the oldest church building in town. Now, St. Philip's oldest congregation, but the building itself burned in 1830. The building we saw there is from 1838. This has never burned. 1751. This is the same building George Washington walked into in 1791 to go to church. George Washington, I should tell you, was here for 8 days ever, y'all. We were so excited. I think we wrote down every single thing the man does for 8 days. So I can tell you, he sat on pew 43. Thank you for asking. He went to the Sunday evening service and he went up in that tower. So when you see that tower above the clock, think of George Washington standing up there in 1791. His wings blowing in the wind. That had been a lookout during the Revolution. So you wanted to see that. That's where the soldiers had stood up there. Now, if you look down the street, this is Broad Street, a very important street and a very common street name in old towns. See that neat building at the end? Y'all should tour that if you get the chance. That's called the Old Exchange Building in Provost Dungeon. Those front steps, they stood and read us the Declaration of Independence, 1791. We have bagpipes. Of course we have bagpipes. You know bagpipes were invented to scare horses? Sure. They're supposed to scare cavalry horses, give them the butt, drop their riders. No, he's cool. This guy's... That's what I'm saying. This is the coolest horse down here. Okay. I always say if a horse could smoke, he would like me have a cigarette. He would have a beer. Yeah, that's right. I've seen it before. Coming out of brother, just coming out over there. It's a neat area, right? This right here, you see the crepe myrtle trees? Those are all over the south, right? They come to us from China, though. Now, hanging from them is a different plant. That's Spanish moss. Hanging down. That gets everything it needs from the air, so it can hang here, but also hangs, oak trees, all kinds of trees. Darn Scots, they're taking over everywhere. I'm Scottish. Originally was the Scottish social order, just like that was the Irish. This was the Scottish. It's possibility. I don't know. Actually, they still have a lot of events here, so it could be a wedding. If you saw the movie, who saw the movie The Patriot with Mel Gibson? Right? There's a scene in that where they're hanging King George in effigy, and that's where they filmed it, right in front there, between those two center posts. This house over here was Aunt Charlotte's house. Kids ran up there in the piazza. We're kind of sitting on tape on top of Heath Ledger. He was down here on the street. They do a lot of movies down here, right? You know, enough to throw some sand on the street, take down a sign or two. Looks like the old days. One thing they will not let you mess with, though, anything to do with fire. Because they just had too many big fires, so our city code's that big. So they came here in the 80s. They're going to do a thing called the North and South. That kid named Patrick Swayze in it. And you know Hollywood, they're like, all right, you need to close the street for the next 4 weeks. You're going to camp off your fire hydrant over there. We go, you read our city code. We can't camp off the fire hydrant in Charleston. You can't do it. Yeah, that's all right. We'll get a guy called the set designer, put a barrel over it. You'll never know it's well, you better read the year. No stress. This was originally had to be called the Scotch Meeting House, right? Couldn't call it a church because until the Revolution, it became a church. 2 bell towers, most bells in town. Then when the war starts, and you know if I don't say which war, you know which war, right? The war. When the war starts, ooh, boy, I tell you, they're on all the time. They're all on one central line, run by the city. The city wants to be able to have the ability to turn them off before a hurricane hits. So about 6 hours before a hurricane hits, those all will be shut off. If you see that, it's probably time to go. Time to check out Atlanta. Now here's a house that's also in, and it's got that light blue color underneath the porch there. And that light blue color is supposed to keep ghosts away. That's Haint Blue. All right, Haint Blue. Ghosts to see that thing, it's a daytime sky. Avoid it. Again, privately owned houses here. These don't change much. I was watching a John Wayne movie the other night. It's called Reap the Wild Wind, filmed in 1941, right here. It's a pirate movie, and they're in the streets of Charleston in the Carriage, and as they're talking, these 3 houses go by. 85 years ago, and they look exactly the same. It's like, oh, yeah. Can't do anything to change them, of course. Which that was in the north and south as well. I have, in doing this 10 years, I've seen maybe twice, somebody suddenly gets a new porch. You know, what happened to 70? Well, they found the drawing from 1838. Can't restore them. I'm feeling there's a whole black market of people doing these drawings. They had a jacuzzi, huh? Well, there it is. Can't argue with that. Notice how they use this Japanese greeting big on the sidewalk, or excuse me, on the staircase. That's neat stuff. Yeah, that showed up on a French ship that arrived in Charleston Harbor during the French Revolution. Imagine that, a French ship shows up. Back then when a ship showed up in your port, that was like a news break, right? We'll throw down and talk to the sailors. Hey, what's going on back in France? Like, we don't know, we just came from Asia. We've been sailing the world collecting plants for our beloved king, King Louis, and his beautiful wife, Marie Antoinette. We said, you might want to sit down. We have some bad news for you. At the end of a very sad conversation, they said, you want some tree plants? So we got the crepe myrtle trees, which are all over the American South. One here. The smooth bark trees, right? You see those in Florida, you see them in Texas, they're from China. I think we see them all over the South for two reasons. One is they look pretty for about a month a year, right? So we plant them. But secondly, they tend to survive hurricanes, and pine trees do not. So I remember, for instance, driving north of town up to the Francis Marion National Forest a couple of years after you go. That whole forest was flat as could be. All the pine trees are flat. The great myrtle trees are there, right? Taking the place of the pine trees. And there's a whole beach town named after the myrtle trees. It's famous. Can't think of it offhand, but I can think of it. You'd know it if I said it. You go, yeah, here. Another tree, while we're talking about trees, is of course this, right? This is the state tree, even though it's not technically a tree. That is the cabbage palmetto. And that is what we had to build a fort out of over there on Sullivan's Island during the Revolution. During the Revolution, in 1776, the British decided, hey, this Washington is a little harder enough to crack than we thought. And they went back to England and they said to Parliament, hey, send us more ships and more redcoats and we'll get this revolution taken care of. They said, yeah, France and Spain would love it if we sent the rest of the army and navy across the ocean. How about if you get some local help? Didn't the Southerners say they love the king? Oh yeah, they love him down there. So they came down here and they were going to grab the Southerners here. We're going to march up from the south and take on Washington as the redcoats come down from the north. That's the plan, the Southern strategy. Only thing is, it's based on what we would now call bad intel. Charleston is the Boston of the South. We've had a tea party 30 days before Boston had a tea party. And we have a fort waiting for them on Sullivan's Island. So we don't have much to build forts out of since we don't have any stone. We don't have time to make bricks, so we made it out of those palmetto trees and sand. The two things we had. Go. Get ahead of that. 13 British ships showed up on Fort Sullivan's Island with 400 British cannon. They opened fire on this fort, and the cannonballs bounced off the soft, spongy trees. So we built a rubber fort on Sullivan's Island. We had 40 guns. They had 400 guns, and we won. And it changed the course of the American Revolution in late June of 1776. That was important because something big was about to happen in early July of 1776 up in Philadelphia. If we lost that day, it wouldn't have mattered anything. That is why we took the tree like that and put it on our flag. All right, this area here, remember, until they built the seawall over there, you couldn't build anything. So the oldest of these houses dates to the 1750s. This house here was built on stilts. This is the Gibbs house. He used to have a wharf coming out the back door. That wharf was the longest wharf on the East Coast for 100 years. Mr. Gibbs would advertise in the London papers, those who would like to dock for free in Charlestown may do so at the Gibbs Wharf on the south end of the peninsula if you will donate your ballast stones. Those ballast stones are like gold down here. Now in this area, he's not using them to pave streets, he's using them just to fill in the marshes. If you've seen outside of the city proper, you know that around here we don't go from land to water. We go from land to marshes to water, right? A semi-area which at high tide is underwater, at low tide is just mud. And that's what it was like from here to where the water is now. So where the water is now is where the deep water was, where you could have ships. But in between there was mud and the sweet grass, right? And then long wharfs. The street coming up here is Lenwood Street, and I tell you, when I first started this job, I thought, you know what? I don't want anybody to ask me a question, and I'll just have no idea. So I said, I'm going to find out what the heck a Lenwood tree looks like. Well, I found out there is no Lenwood tree. It's a good thing to learn early on. Never was a Lenwood tree. So I had a wild idea then. I thought, I wonder if. And strangely enough, I was right. How many of you know your Teddy Roosevelt? Remember Teddy Roosevelt? He fought in the Spanish-American War before he was president. And before that, he kind of started the Spanish-American War. when he was the Assistant Secretary of the Navy. And his boss took a couple days off and he moved a bunch of ships into Havana Harbor. It started a war. His boss comes back, Roosevelt, he started a war. He said, that's okay, I was going to resign anyway. I want to fight in this war. Who wants to be the general over that guy, the crazy millionaire? They said, we need a Sherman Potter type. And they got Leonard Wood. Leonard Wood, right? Camp Leonard Wood's out there in Missouri, right? He was probably one of the most, who would have known his name? He's kind of like Schwarzkopf, where we all knew his name at the time, but he didn't really do too much in history as far as the battles go, because there wasn't a lot of wars at that time. What's there, buddy? Here you go. Yeah, there was a house there, and it was not quite 75. So that's the other side of that 75. Yeah, so if you have a 70-year-old house, you're getting a lot of phone calls. Because there's multimillionaires who can't find any land on this peninsula and they want to build a house here. Right. You want to leave? Guess they got on out. Came by here the other day, there's a 3-year-old boy squished between the door and the storm door. Waving at us. He must have read Flat Stanley, I guess. There's some guy in the Carriage from New York. They always have the fast lines, the guys from there. He's like, hey, he's probably in timeout. You're going to the skinny room again, Tim. Here's some more of these trees. See, we're working around the roots. So Charleston, the first thing that happens at the beginning of the Civil War is the South grabs Fort Sumter, right? So now they can control what comes in and out of here. And they never give it up through the whole war. The whole Civil War story here is the North is trying to get it back. Several battles, but they're not able to. If they did, if they had gotten it before the war was over, they would have come in and we would be looking at 60s track buildings here with historic plaques. Right? You wouldn't have come here for that matter. It'd be another southern town that was a bunch of 60s buildings because everything got blown up in the Civil War. If you want to see that, you just need to go to a capital city.
See that.
2 hours west of here used to be the most beautiful capital city in America, Columbia, South Carolina. It was the richest capital city. It was like Charleston, but over rolling hills. Today, there's some nice neighborhoods, but most of it is strip mall, McDonald's, historic plaque. And you see the plaques, they all start with these great words. Formerly on this site. They all have these words, burned by Sherman's troops, 1865. But they couldn't get past Fort Sumter. By mid-1863, a frustrated Abraham Lincoln sends down the biggest ship in the Union Navy, the USS New Ironsides, 100 guns on either side of this giant Goliath of a ship. And who do you send against Goliath? The Little David, semi-submersible. 2 guys above deck, 2 guys below deck. George S. Patton's great uncle, William T. Glassell, is manning this ship, puts a big hole in that Union ship. A few months later, the world's first submarine, the Hunley, sinks another ship out there. And after that, the North says, that's it. If you won't surrender your forts and allow us in, we declare the entire city of Charleston a military target. You can't call a city a military target. That would be against the rules of civilized warfare. Obviously, it's a civilian target. It's a city. That's what civilian target means. We got our kids living here. They said it's a new kind of war. The North is unveiling something that we're used to now. But at the time, it was pretty shocking. Total war. Total war is where you don't just try to kill the people wearing uniforms. You try to undermine the army by taking out the economy that supports them. To do that, you take out the infrastructure that the economy depends on. That's why Sherman's burning all those bridges and factories and farms. Plantations, crops, on its way across. It's why we're going to bomb the heck out of Dresden, Germany. And it's why our houses, churches, and schools start blowing up on a hot day in August 1863. The house blows up. Imagine we're just sitting here talking, and all of a sudden, and a house explodes. The people that owned that house, by the way, they knew the North was across the river. When they came out, they said, we thought it was a meteor. Wow, that's a bad week. The North across the river, now the meteor shower. 15 minutes later, a second meteor hits the second house. This must have been, don't you think, those of us who remember that feeling when the second tower got hit? And all of a sudden there was no more arguing. You go, oh, yeah. Another shot hits us 50 minutes later. There will be a shot in this town every 15 minutes for 587 days. It's the longest bombardment in human history. Arguably, the only army ever to beat that is the Nazis when they tried to get to Stalingrad. So we go from richest city to one of the poorest in America in like 2 years. And we stayed poor for about 80 years. So like I said, it's a weird history. Nobody else was that rich, period, and they became this poor and then stayed poor for so long. Right? We stayed poor for longer than a lot of other southern towns that got burnt to the ground did. Towns like Atlanta came back sooner than we did. But nobody marched south saying, we're going to burn Atlanta. They wanted to burn Charleston. There's songs written about it. And it was like Baghdad, was in another war, or Berlin, soldiers sang about it. And then they really didn't get to it. All right, here's some neat houses. But what that means is when you see these houses, and look at this house here. Put this house in a rural county, right, in Northern California. That's a state park right there, right? We all go there. Some of us got married there, right? We go there at Christmas because they have that neat candlelight thing we all enjoy. And again, somebody will just live in there. That's it, you know. And then there's another one right next door, and another one right there. And this is what survived the longest bombardment in human history, right? And that fire that burned 1,000 buildings. And wait, here's the kid and two knives. 20 years after the war, we're hit by a 7.3 earthquake. It's the only major earthquake we've ever had here, but it was massive, and it's right when we have no money to fix anything. That's why you see a lot of houses in Charleston that lean, right? Leaning this way and leaning that. In 1886, we don't have the money to straighten those out. Today, you're not allowed to. And these are multi-million-dollar houses now. We're going to see a couple in a minute. Those they could be the Ripley's Believe It or Not house, and they're multi-million-dollar houses. You can't straighten them out. So this is what survived all of that. I can't imagine what it was like before all that. All right, now this is, by the way, a great street to run called Trad Street. The only street that goes from river to river. The only one where, if you were tall enough, you could see both rivers. But branching off of here is the Gree Street, which is another great street to go down. Some of the biggest houses, like that house there with the flags, that sold for $10 million a few years ago because it was a fixer-upper. They put $10 million into it since then. And that was an all-girls school in the early 1800s. Madam Tavon School for Girls. This is where Mary Boykin Chestnut, the famous diarist, went to school. Girls are sent here from around the country. Charleston has a neat reputation for highly educated women. I think it's kind of an interesting, nice thing about it. I read a lot of oral poetry written back in the day, and you're always bragging about your daughter and how smart she is. You know, I mean, it was just pretty, of course, and all that, but yeah, she was more than a match for most men. Men were kind of intimidated by a Charleston woman. That particular house, though, let me tell you, that sold about, I don't know, it was 8 years ago for $10 million. And when it did, we have another one of our tour guides. He's a great tour guide. He's from the upstate, kind of a country boy. He knows everything about 1720 and 1830, but cares nothing about anything recent, right? So I told him, I said, hey, man, I heard a rumor about who bought that house. Heard it was a celebrity. And I wanted to tell you who it was because I know you got your ear on the street here. But I did hear it was a famous musician. He goes, I can tell you right now, it's no musician. Now, I know guys goes there all the time, it's not a musician. Oh, I didn't think that family's famous. If anything, they own some kind of cereal company. It's not even a cereal company you ever heard of. I'm like, what's the name of the cereal company? He goes, Holland Oats. I'm like 12 Holland Oats. Like, look at this house in Leaning. This is what I'm talking about here. That's leaning to the right. That should be in Berkeley, California. It looks like something you'd see on Telegraph Avenue. I bet you all noticed this already, but I did not notice this for years. See how the shutters downstairs are solid, but the ones upstairs are louvered? That is all the proof we need that horses have not always had diapers. You imagine back in the old days, you would never open these windows because this is like a barnyard here. Man, there are flies everywhere. You know, you never open them except when you're cleaning them, maybe. And sometimes you want the additional. No, that's not true. But you would close the shades too, or the blind, or the shutters, just to have additional privacy. You might do that upstairs too, but you'll leave the windows open, right? So you can ventilate. So that's why there's different. This is King Street. King Street's an important street, y'all. King Street is the end of the longest street the British ever built in America, the longest road. If you went this way out of town, you turn right, cross the bridge, it has no bridge, you take a ferry to Mount Pleasant, and you could go on the King's Highway to Boston. It's our own Camino Real, right? It's the King's Highway. It's also the highest spot in town. Did you notice that? I was 14 feet above sea level. That was kind of scary, wasn't it? We're descending now. But it means that doesn't flood when the other parts flood, so that's why it's our great shopping street, too. Here's those houses. Look at that lane right there. If you're wondering, yeah, they have leveled the floors inside. I wondered that myself. They had the door open one time. They've even built perpendicular walls. You'd still know the kid that grew up in there, right? You're like this kid. You know, I remember you, Tim. Yeah, you lived across the street. There it is. Ta-da! That's pretty adorable. That is a little kitchen house. Yeah, it's tiny. 500 square feet. You know, the people that own it were on the Carriage a while back. And they were very nice. I didn't ask them much for house, but they were sweet because they said that somebody came by here on a Carriage and from Wisconsin or something, took a picture of it, went home, spent the winter making a pillow of that house. And then one day in the mail, so you get this thing of there's your own house. These houses, I should show you right now, are 70% owned by people who don't live here. That's been a big turn in the last 30 years. It's become a lot more like that. So these people own the nice houses pretty much everywhere, right? And it sort of has to be those people that own these houses. You ever been on the highway and you see a 1920s convertible go by? And you go, oh man, that's cool looking. You know it's not his only car. There's no way it could be, right? You can't do everything you need to in a 20s convertible. And when it breaks down, how long does that take in the shop? Right? You have to have parts made. That's how these houses are. This house here was surrounded by scaffolding for about the last 3 years. I've not even seen this house. We finally took them off. Look at all these beautiful windows it has. Those windows, which look like old windows, look like they're melted, you know, like old windows kind of melt. Yeah, they have them blown to look like that. The windows themselves were well into the 6 figures.
That's crazy.
Great job, man. That's, yeah, you buy yourself a hobby here. You buy a house like this. In fact, the people that own that little cute little house there, very sweet. They're on the carriage, and I go, something tells me, because they're talking about all the kids. I go, this isn't your only house, is it? And they go, oh no, we kind of collect real estate. We kind of have a habit. We like to buy real estate. We're always buying here. And they start talking about all the places. They go, well, we have something out west. They go, have you heard of Malibu? Yeah, I've heard of Malibu. In a house there, there's a place in New York City. I had a woman on the carriage who had flown all of her girlfriends across from London because she collects houses. She wanted to show it to them. You know, like if you had a new car, hey, you guys come over to my house, I'm going to show you my new car. It's like, come over and see my house. This is, like I said, the Scottish Federal. I need to see these backpacks. The kids dropped off their bread gently every week to go to Cotillion. See them going up those stairs. They're not happy. See their moms in the minivan. Come on. Do this. Girls have their debutante balls there still. This is the house of the priest at St. Michael's. The priest there didn't used to just be an independent house. Priest, or the church bought it. And the priest moved in, and the ghost that was supposed to be in there moved out. So again, spiritual gentrification, a real problem. These nice baskets. The baskets here are really a part of Charleston history. The people that made those are descended from the people that brought it from West Africa because they knew how to work with rice. And in West Africa, they used reeds to make baskets to get out the rice. So those are patterns that have been handed down for centuries from this family. You'll see those baskets in the Smithsonian. They're considered an art form. So is this. You see the wrought iron gates? Those little delicate curls were pounded out by a blacksmith over a cake, right?
We had them in Rome.
Oh, yeah?
In his house.
Oh, did you really? You talking about Philip Simmons? Yeah. That's neat. Yeah. So they're right now in the Smithsonian with the display of those. So a lot of great early American artists came out of Charleston. This is our art museum. A lot of other ones worked here because there were people that could pay them. So you'll see some work by Audubon in there, by Samuel Morse. And here is this lawn. Now when I started, I would have said, now of course, that must have been some of the wooden markers, right? For the people that, those wooden markers didn't last, of course. And that was wrong. Actually, we found out what that really is about 8.5 years ago. That's a mass grave for 1738 smallpox epidemic. People were stacked in there 3 high without caskets in 1738. And the reason we know is because it rained here harder than it's ever rained here in history. 24 inches of rain hit us in 24 hours, and the skeletons popped up through the grass. The fence was knocked out by flooding. The skeletons slid right across the street here. Just this is like, I would say 2017, 2018 maybe. I was working that day. I remember that. People were running in the barn, right? I'm working in there, and all my friends coming in from their tours. It's like a horror movie. Yeah, and I'm like, don't exaggerate, dude. It's not that bad. Yeah, it was that bad, actually. It was off the whole street. And let me tell you, I didn't even realize how bad it was until about a year ago. I had a friend of mine who is our county coroner. Her name is Bobby Jo O'Neill. She's the Charleston County coroner. Look her up. She was sitting right there on the carriage. And I said, hey, Bobby Jo, did I exaggerate that story? Because I don't want to do that. She goes, Mike, you didn't even tell about the worst part. Why didn't you even talk about all those dogs? I'm like, oh gosh, they found dog skeletons? She goes, no, dogs found the skeletons. She said it was like the biggest free-for-all. The dogs still talk about it. It's a dog holiday now. Day of the Bones, they call it. It's the old dog with a t-shirt. I remember the Day of the Bones. We think we found them all. We hope we found them all. Let me say this, just to be serious for one small second. We're talking about graves. But, you know, that was the craziest time. But we do find skeletons here a lot. And I have to say, there's a historian part of me who wants them to do DNA testing and all that stuff. But I'm always touched by how much reverence is shown. Right? It was like, no, these people are at peace. I mean, now that we got them back, anyway. There we go. And we're gonna pray over them, and that's what we did. We prayed over them again, and we buried them again. That was it. We put some concrete on top of it. So we're going along where the wall was again, and we talked about the powder magazine, which again, you know, it's not usually open. It's only been open this afternoon. So if you guys want to go to come forward, take a tour. It's bigger than it looks. Look here. You see this house behind it? That's the Nicholas Trott house. Nicholas Trott. If this was I was talking about how this is kind of like a frontier, you know, like think of the West, you know. Well, in the West, one thing you always have is what we call the hanging judge. Well, Nicholas Trott was our hanging judge. He was the guy that would hang the pirates. We had a lot of pirate problems here, right? And he would hang them by the waterfront, 6 at a time. Now, you don't catch 6 pirates at a time. The other guys are in the dungeon having to wait their turn because they want to space them out because they want their friends to come into the harbor and see their friends hanging there. There was a psychological warfare against these pirates. It worked pretty well, apparently. But don't be a pirate if you're thinking about it. Church? Churches. We got 120 churches there. It's an active church. I don't know if people know that church. It's a nice church. Nice pastor. Let's them do ghost tours though. You know, because people want to use that all day. He's still a pastor, right? So a few years ago, there's a sign out there he put out there. The only ghost of St. Philip's is the Holy Ghost. If you'd like to hear about it, come on Sunday. Fair enough. We are back down at the creek bed. Now remember the wall's there, right? Creek is here. The wall comes down. People start moving on the other side of the creek. Before long, the creek is deemed in the way. People are complaining about the creek. So after the revolution, a guy buys up all this creek land, all the way up to Broad Street, down to not Broad Street, Eating Street, and down to the water. His name is a big name here, Pinckney. Charles Coatsworth Pinckney is this particular Pinckney. Thank you. And Charles Coatsworth Pinckney is going to be the guy who says, all right, this land is going to, you mean to cut you off there, sorry? Charles Coatsworth Pinckney is the guy who says, look, I want to get this land in the city so you can put all the markets here. And you can keep this land as long as it remains a market. And he said, and one other rule. He said, no auctions. I don't want to hear about auctions in these markets. He said, I don't want to listen to auctions in these markets. Because everything that got him off the ship is auction. His house is over there. He doesn't want to listen to that all day. This is the one place we know human beings are never sold in Charleston. And a lot are. 160,000 people, but it doesn't happen here. That's the meat market, produce, small meats down here, seafood down here. You'll hear people call this the old slave market because they're misunderstanding what it was sometimes referred to in a colloquial fashion, just the way you refer to your farmers markets, because farmers bring the food in, or the fishermen bring the fish, you call it a fisherman's market. Who brought the food in directly from the plantation to sell it? Probably not the plantation owner. Right? And who's buying it from the kitchen? Who's shopping? Is Miss Scarlett down here? Does she know how to pick out a tomato? It would be her cook, wouldn't it? That's who's here. Hello, puppy. These guys are going to be packing up pretty soon here, but there'll be lots of new people coming in tonight, so if you're going to be around, good place to be here in Charleston, the night market. Any questions, anything we didn't get to? A lot of stuff going on in this town. There's a great restaurant, and the oldest one in Charleston right now. It's Henry's, opened in 1932. The building's older than that. It's got a nice rooftop area, music every night. Good place for shrimp and grits. Sheet crab soup, which are the two things you gotta have before you leave this town. Right? Why go to San Diego and I have the Mexican food? Have I really been to San Diego, right? You gotta eat some good food there. It's like there, you gotta have that stuff here. So. Let me tell you, when I do go to San Diego, it's the first thing I get is Mexican food. We've started to get some good Mexican food here, but we didn't generally have a whole lot of it. All right. Hello, Miss Savannah. Thank you, ma'am. Sorry. If you look up ahead, y'all, you see this little blue van. That is the Booze Pops van. This is kind of a good example of Charleston here from the end here. Charleston, we do not walk around Charleston with alcoholic beverages. You know, as much alcohol as is sold in this hard drinking town, we don't walk in the street with it. That kind of nonsense, you can do that in Savannah, okay? We have morals here, people. However, I went to court, and the judge says if you freeze it, totally okay. Really? Why is that, Your Honor? Because, well, it's not an alcoholic beverage. If you freeze it, it's not a beverage, it's food. Okay. So, COVID comes to town, 2020, right? Remember that? Closed down for 3.5 months. We reopened. We had a plastic shield here, plastic shield there, plastic shield there. You guys are in the church Friday. You can't hear anything back here. We're all losing our voices. Find out where they want me to go here. Are you? I think you're probably going in, right?
You took a yellow one?
Yeah.
We're going here? What's that? Am I going to the bucket? Yeah, you go ahead.
Okay, thanks. No hesitation, Cash. You gotta make it good.
No hesitation.
So, all of our bars suddenly had a 9 o'clock curfew for alcohol sales. Hundreds of bars in this hard drinking town. 9 o'clock. Ding, ding, ding. Sorry, y'all. No alcohol. No, COVID's coming. But there'd always be one guy at that bar who'd go, anywhere I can find food? Oh, yes, sir. There's a street party at Booze Pops at 9 o'clock and everything. Everyone's standing out there 8 feet apart. 6 feet. Excuse me, the safe distance, 6 feet. There were now a fleet of Booze Pops trucks to go through neighborhoods with moms, Jason. All right, this is Ricky. This is why Ricky gets half the tips. Look at the turn he can make. I try to not do that. Thank you. A little bit upset.